Okay, I'm going to show you how to use Dad Studio 4.5, the Genesis, and we're going to use ZBrush with it. We're going to create a texture map with Polypaint, and the Polypaint consists of Polypainting with color and Polypainting with textures. And I'm going to show the difference in the two, and we're going to go to File and send to ZBrush. Leave the export and deformation off, and we're going to load it in here, edit mode with T, letter T, or then we're going to come over here to frame all so it fits in here. Another thing is we're going to need to switch the material here so we can see a little bit better, and color and fill object. And another thing that we need to do is let's see here, if we turn on the poly frames here, we don't have any poly groups, so go to poly groups, auto group with UVs, and that way we can control shift click what areas that we need to do. We turn that back off. Now if we poly paint with color, we need to RGB on and ZAD off. ZAD means when we turn this off, we don't get no deformation. So if we paint with a color, we don't really get any distorts, it doesn't distort. Now if we, I'm going to turn this to white. Now if we do it with a texture, and let's control Z that, drag rec, and we'll drag up. Well, it's getting distorted because we don't have enough geometry. Let's control Z that back. I'm turn on polyframe, make sure I don't go back too far. And divide, and divide, and divide. Now if I drag here, you can see it's a lot better. Now if I want to create a map for this section here, as you can see we got the poly groups here, we're going to control click that right there. This part needs to be hidden when we're going to create a map. So we're going to go to the texture map, then create, then new from Polypaint. Then there's our new map, and if you want to export this, you'll clone that, and it'll clone it over here. And texture, and if you're doing it to DAS, I believe you need to flip this, then you'll export it. I'm going to turn that off right now and turn this off right now. And actually I'm going to control Z this back a few times. Let's get rid of a bunch of this stuff. Well, with the problem with that, if I'm doing a certain area, I'm having to divide all the mesh, alright? Well, that's really slowing down the program. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to control shift click this, and we're going to go to the modifier topology and delete hidden. Then when I divide this, I'm dividing just the arm and not the whole mesh, so I'll be able to get a lot more detail for my texture. Another thing is when I poly paint, it actually I'm framing that up, it really kind of slows things down when you got a lot of subdivision level. So instead of just having a lot of subdivision levels, you can actually tone this down, let's say to number 2, and we're going to create a texture. We're going to be painting on a texture. So we're going to go to the UV map, and we want to create quite a large texture because we're going to convert this back over to Polypaint here in just a minute. So 4096, and create a new texture. And the new texture is 4096. Now I'm going to be using the projection master. Alright, it's the known bug. If you want to texture on both sides, you need to go to display property and turn on double. Another thing is when I kind of scale this back, well, I really don't want to texture this with the projection master way back like that because my texture will get kind of distorted. So we're going to go into frame all, and then we're going to use the projection master. We're going to use double-sided and drop now. Alright, we're going to use a brush, the simple brush. We're going to use the drag rec and the texture, this one here. Let's turn up our intensity quite large, or to the max. And when we drag it out, we'll get something like this and project it with the double-sided on. And give it a second, and you can see how that works. And if we look over to the geometry, it doesn't matter where the subdivision level is at, the texture is always going to be nice and not, you know, distorted. Another thing good about doing it with this is I don't always have to, you know, work with the projection master at high subdivision levels, because if I do, everything's just going to get slow. I can do this later when I make a map. Example, when I was talking about scaling, you know, when you press the frame all, you get better texture transfer. Now if I bring it way back like this, and you might have to go full screen on the video to see what's going on here. And if I drag this out like this, something similar, see how it's scaled way back? When it's finished here, I'm going to zoom this up. You can see the one on the right got really distorted because it was projected with the arm that was scaled way back. So Control Z this. What we want to do is make sure that it's framed all the way up. Then we're going to do it, and it'll transfer the texture a lot better. And since I was able to just subdivide just the arm, I was able to, you know, get a lot of subdivision levels. So the next thing we want to do is crank it all the way up, number 5. And we want to go to Polypaint. We're going to open up this texture map, and here's the texture map. So now what we want to do is take Polypaint from texture. So when I do this, it's going to convert this in the texture into a Polypaint. And it's asked me MRGB, turn it on, so we'll turn that on. And now the texture is off. So now now this is actually Polypaint here, so if I lower the subdivision level, you'll see it gets distorted. Now if I turn the texture on, you'll only see the texture. It still has polypainting, but you're only going to see the texture. So basically, with the texture off, and we're at the high subdivision level, we're going to new from Polypaint, and give it a few seconds, and there's our new map at 4096 by 4096. Clone the texture. It comes over here. Then we'll come up to the texture, and when you export this, I believe in dash you need to flip vertically, and we'll flip that vertically and give it a second, and you can see it flip. Then you export that into the